Through the scope, a compound flickered in the heat. Hostages were trapped inside. Explosives wired beneath the floor. Assault teams couldn't move one wrong step, and the entire village would vanish. On a ridge 2 miles away, she lay flat against the stone, rifle steady. Wind ripped through the canyon, shifting every few seconds, tearing calculations apart. Her spotter whispered, 15-second window. This is it. She drew in a slow breath. Hundreds of lives balanced on the weight of a single trigger pull. Her finger tightened. Black screen. Before we dive into this story, where are you watching from? Let us know in the comments. Welcome to Grateful Stories, where tales of compassion and kindness are told. Let's uncover what really happened. Through the scope, 3,400 yards, 10-second countdown. The spotter whispers, trigger squeeze. Black. The desert hums. Heat shimmers above sun-bleached concrete as the afternoon shift files into the armory. Tools click. Brushes rasp. Solvent stings the air. General Richard Halstead moves down the central aisle, boots steady, eyes scanning racks and workbenches. Beside him, Lieutenant Colonel Patrick Dorsey carries a tablet and a clipped, efficient silence. Inspection, not ceremony. In the far corner, away from chatter and open doors, a woman sits with a rifle broken into its clean geometry. Helena Shade Cortez wipes carbon from a bolt face, checks lugs, aligns pieces on a mat in perfect rows. No wasted motion, no sound beyond cloth on steel. The Barrett M107A1 lies open like a blueprint. Receiver, bolt carrier, springs in a dish lid. Her hands are careful, methodical, unhurried. She moves like repetition is a kind of oath. Halstead almost passes her by. The corner is shadowed, the bench plain, the operator wearing no theatrics. Then a small strip of metal catches at the edge of his vision. He stops. Dorsey takes one step more, then freezes with him. The general's gaze fixes on a badge sewn above the pocket. Matte and unassuming. 3,400 yards confirmed engagement. He reads it once, then again, voice low, as if the numbers might change with a second look. A thin line draws between his brows. Impossible, he murmurs. Cortez glances up. Her eyes are calm, the kind that don't argue with wind. Sir, she says, even verified by an observer board. The armory seems to step half a beat off its rhythm. Brushes pause. Metal tinks to a stop inside a tray. Dorsey shifts, unlocking the tablet with his thumb. Halstead's tone stays cool. Name, rank, Staff Sergeant Helena Cortez. Sir, sniper section. She doesn't stand. The rifle is still open, and safety has its own rank. Dorsey's fingers move. Records populate in neutral font training. Assignments, dates. He scrolls, then frowns in a way that means not confusion, but caution. Sir, he says, keeping his voice near the general's shoulder, multiple advanced marksmanship schools, long-range ballistic computation, environmental modeling, some course codes are redacted. He scrolls again. Unit attachments to elements that he weighs his words do not appear in standard force structure. Halstead watches Cortez, not the screen. Staff Sergeant, explain the badge. She folds the cloth once, sets it aside and meets him cleanly. Range measured and certified. Multiple observers. Full video chain of custody. A beat. Mission details are compartmented. Sir, the general doesn't blink. The numbers sit on the small rectangle of metal, quiet and stubborn. Most trained snipers consider half that distance beyond practical engagement. What are you claiming here? Claiming nothing, Circum. Cortez says, merely maintaining the weapon I'm issued. Dorsey tilts the tablet again, more cautious now. Sir, there's a notation provisional clearance required for full file. The basic shell confirms top of class scores. There's also a competency line in extreme range targeting. The acronym listed is atypical. Around them, the armory resumes its cadence. Not loudly, just the usual work. Stitched back into place, Shade seats the firing pin in a small vise, inspects it under light, then sets it down without hurry. Halstead's jaw tightens a shade. The badge remains exactly where it was, uncompromised by doubt. How many engagements beyond 2,000 yards? Staff Sergeant, above my clearance to quantify? Sir? The general exhales once through his nose. It changes nothing, but it sets a course. Lieutenant Colonel Dorsey. Sir, coordinate a demonstration. Halstead doesn't raise his voice. He never needs to. I want to see her process end to end. A real line. Real conditions. Cortez doesn't look surprised. She aligns the buffer spring by habit, thumb measuring distance from the coil's edge to the notch. Range here tops at 1,300 yards, she says. But that's enough to show you the architecture. Dorsey nods. Already typing. We can lock the extended lane. Steel at 1-3. Mirage will be heavy this hour. Approvals from range control and safety are straightforward. Halstead's eyes return to the rifle, to its long, utilitarian balance. Tomorrow morning, he says, before heat picks up, Cortez wipes a film of solvent from the charging handle and sets it on the mat parallel to the barrel. Copy, sir. The general doesn't move yet. He looks at the badge one more time, as if measuring its weight relative to the room. The corner holds its shadow without apology. Who was your instructor for environmental modeling, he asks. Almost conversational. Different courses, different names, she answers. I learned to read Mirage by watching heat bend fence lines. I learned to trust wind calls by missing, then not missing. Dorsey pauses in his typing. Something in that answer lands. He makes a note he won't say out loud. Spotter Halstead asks, Corporal Jordan Pike, sir? He'll be at the range. Halstead nods. Dorsey confirms with a tap. The schedule populates. The safety codes slot into their rectangles, and a small icon turns green. Across the aisle, two privates whisper, glance over, stop themselves. The murmur dies when Cortez swivels the receiver gently and lays a thin ribbon of oil in a line so straight it might be drawn with a ruler. Precision, even in quiet chores. What's your hold philosophy at distance, the general asks, as if testing an edge. Dial for elevation, hold for wind. Depends on how fast the wind lies, she says. Dial what won't change in 30 seconds. Hold what will. Dorsey hides a small, involuntary grin behind the tablet. He clears his throat before it can be seen. Halstead's gaze drops to her hands. There's a faint scar across the base of the thumb, old and pale. He doesn't ask how she got it. He asks nothing about stories. He asks about performance. Be at the lane at 06, he says. Yes, sir. He turns, then stops again. Staff Sergeant. Sir. Your badge. He says, each syllable measured, will either be a problem or a standard. Tomorrow clarifies which. Cortez inclines her head once. Not a salute, not defiance. Just a clean acknowledgement that gravity exists. The general moves on. Dorsey follows. Messages already spooling in the air between devices and range control. Behind them, Shade snaps the rifle back into itself with small, decisive clicks. In the doorway, heat pushes in like a living thing. Sand grits under boots. The afternoon flags along the corridor, and somewhere a compressor kicks on and holds steady. At the corner bench, Cortez lifts the assembled rifle to her shoulder and checks the eye relief against the armory wall. Light wavers as the air moves. She blinks once, slow, letting the glass settle. Outside, the sun leans toward evening. Inside, the badge does not move. It says only what it says. A minute later, she packs the dope card, the kestrel, the small tools in their foam slots. The case shuts with a latching sound that seems louder than it is. She palms the handle and stands. The room doesn't watch her leave. It returns to its business, which is how good rooms do. Brush, click, wipe. Inventory checked off in neat columns. By the exit, Dorsey glances back and meets her eyes for one neutral beat. He nods once, not friendly, not cold, just precise. Shade steps into the corridor light. The air tastes like dust and heat and the faint metallic promise of dawn. She walks toward it without hurry. Black. Dawn draped itself over Redstone Range, pale light sliding down the ridges. The desert air was still cool, a brief mercy before the sun burned it into waves. Gravel crunched as trucks lined the perimeter fence. General Halstead stood near the firing lane, arms folded, eyes hard. Around him gathered half a dozen officers, notebooks tucked under their arms, binoculars slung from straps. They spoke in low tones, guarded curiosity behind clipped words. Shade arrived with her spotter, Corporal Jordan Pike. Both moved without ceremony, carrying a hard case each. Pike lowered the tripod, unfolded its legs until they locked, and mounted the ballistic computer. Shade set the Barrett M107A1 on its mat, the rifle long and severe against the sand. The target stood 1,300 yards out, a steel plate catching early light. Through the scope it shimmered, warped by mirage that danced over the flat stretch. A heat haze trial, even at this hour. Halstead's aides muttered as they looked downrange. One officer shook his head. "Too far for a semi-auto?" he whispered. Another smirked. "If she dings it once, it's luck. Twice fairy tale." Pike ignored them. He powered up the Kestrel weather meter, letting it drink the air. Dota scrolled temperature, humidity, pressure. He tapped it into the ballistic computer, which blinked awake with graphs and numbers. Shade launched the small recon drone, cleared by safety control. Its rotors buzzed like an insect as it drifted out, rising above the scrub. Sensors transmitted wind readings from 3 layers of altitude. Building a profile, Pike read them off in a flat tone, as if dictating grocery items. Shade nodded, adjusting dials. She didn't speak much, not even to explain. Still, Halstead leaned closer, curious despite himself. "Wind at surface steady," Pike said. 7 miles per hour from left, mid-layer 9, gusts at 11. High layer irregular. She entered the corrections, hands calm. The officers shifted, restless, wanting action, not numbers. Dorsey scribbled notes anyway, eyes flicking from device to shooter. Shade lowered behind the rifle. Her cheek found the comb of the stock, hands settling as if molded there. The Barrett's magazine was heavy with 50 BMG cartridges, each a finger-long promise. Through her scope, the target bent and shimmered, steel warped by heat waves. She slowed her breathing, letting chest and heartbeat quiet. Pike leaned in. "Hold point 3 right. Dial 27 elevation." She acknowledged with a blink, then squeezed. The shot thundered downrange, a violent crack that slammed the line. Dust puffed around her mat. Brass clanged aside. Half a second stretched, then a metallic scream echoed back. The round clipped the edge of the plate, gouging steel. Officers reacted in chorus. Some gasped, others laughed sharply. One snorted. Lucky strike. Could have been anywhere on that edge. Shade neither flinched nor argued. She reached up, twisted the turret 2 clicks, 0.2 mil to adjust. Her face stayed calm, voice flat, correction applied. Pike watched the mirage again, lips tight, then whispered, "Stable window. Send when ready." She exhaled, fingers sliding to the trigger. The world compressed to a dot inside crosshairs. Breath out, gentle squeeze. The Barrett roared once more. Time lagged, silence heavy in its trail. Then clang, center hit. The plate rang like a bell struck true, echoing across the barren expanse. Every voice on the line fell silent. Even the skeptic stared, binoculars frozen. The small black mark bloomed dead center on the target face. Undeniable. Halstead felt the breath leave his chest. Unmeasured. His jaw locked, eyes narrowing as if seeing the math behind the shot. He knew this wasn't luck. This was design, patience, and cold skill converged. Pike lifted his head from his notes. Impact center mass. Confirmed. Shade withdrew from the scope, cycling the bolt with a practiced pull. Smoke drifted lazy spirals around the muzzle brake. She laid the rifle back on safe and looked at no one in particular. The silence stretched long. Then one officer muttered, almost grudging. Center hit at 1-3. Clean. Another swallowed, his earlier grin gone. Couldn't fake that, he whispered. Halstead kept his eyes on Shade, weighing what he had just seen against years of doctrine. He knew trained snipers struggled at 800. He knew most commands called 1,000 the edge of combat practicality. Yet she had made steel sing at 1,300 as if it were routine. Shade brushed grit from her glove, already preparing for a second string. She wasn't performing for them. She was simply working. Halstead turned slightly to Dorsey. The lieutenant colonel didn't look up from his tablet. He was still typing, recording, numbers feeding into logs. His voice came low. Sir, that was deliberate. She read the wind like a chart. No hesitation. Halstead didn't reply. He only watched as Cortez checked the scope's glass again, unbothered by witnesses, unshaken by doubt. Around them, the desert heat began to rise, shimmering harder. The officers shifted uncomfortably, sweat starting at collars. But Shade remained steady, her presence as cool as if dawn still ruled the sky. For her, the demonstration wasn't theater. It was another morning with a rifle, another set of variables bent to calculation. One shot near, one shot true, together forming proof. Halstead finally drew in breath. His tone carried no praise, no disbelief, only the weight of fact. Not chance, he said quietly. Not at all. Shade didn't answer. She only chambered another round, the metallic click echoing against steel silence. The test wasn't finished. General Halstead hadn't slept well. The demonstration at 1,300 yards had silenced his officers, but inside, his own disbelief kept gnawing. Steel plates could be hit. Conditions could align. He needed more than a show. He needed truth buried under layers of clearance. For a week, he pushed papers through channels, signed forms, leaned on favors from old friends, now behind Pentagon doors. The process wasn't quick, and it wasn't clean. Every request came back with black lines and red stamps. Still, he persisted until one morning an encrypted file appeared on his desk. It carried the seal of the Department of Defense and a header marked in sharp red, access granted, Task Force Sentinel, Project Ironwatch. The file was slim in appearance, but Halstead knew appearances lied. Behind those digital pages was the story of Helena Cortez. He sat in his office, blinds half drawn, tablet glowing pale across the wood desk. Dorsey lingered near the doorway, silent, waiting for permission. Halstead gestured him in. Together they leaned over the screen. The first entry surprised even him. Recruit training. Fort Sheridan. Date stamped 7 years prior. Notes flagged her as an anomalous marksman within the first 2 weeks. At 20 years old, she had broken 3 range records held for decades. One instructor's comment glowed raw precision beyond instructional ceiling. Instead of joining a conventional line unit, Cortez was quietly siphoned into a pipeline not listed in manuals. Names of schools blurred with black bars, but enough acronyms remained to paint a picture. Advanced Sniper Development, Ballistic Computation, Cross-Domain Reconnaissance. Courses most soldiers had never heard existed. Halstead scrolled further. Deployment logs appeared, each one clipped and sterile. Afghanistan remote overwatch on mountain passes. Syria night operations supporting joint taskings. West Africa counterinsurgency. Long-range interdictions across desert flats. Every theater read like the place where standard doctrine failed and someone needed a solution from beyond the manual. Then the page changed. A bold header engagement record, 3,400 yards. The screen shifted from words to diagrams. Elevation maps unfurled. Red contour lines showing ridges and canyons. Halstead leaned closer, Heart steady but heavy, the scene built itself in his head. Rocky mountainside, winds twisting down narrow gullies, never steady. At the far end, a walled compound built into stone. Inside, hostages held by a cell armed with explosives. Assault teams had tried to plan a breach. Every approach risked detonation. Standard tactics were useless. The file listed shooter, Staff Sergeant Helena Cortez, spotter, Corporal Jordan Pike, location, redacted. Halstead read on. Cortez and Pike had crawled into position before dawn, finding a perch carved into shale. Distance to target 3,400 yards, nearly 2 miles. Every breath of wind changed the math. For 4 hours she lay prone, adjusting hold, recalculating, waiting for a window. Flashback unrolled in his imagination. He could almost hear the rasp of breath in her throat, the ache in her elbows pressed to stone. Mirage blurred the compound until it looked like water. Pike whispered numbers, his voice low in the comms. Wind shifted high layer, 17 miles, variable. Correction point 4 mils left. She stayed motionless. Patience wasn't just skill, it was survival. Through the glass, she tracked the man inside, a figure near the hostages, wires trailing from his vest into a control box. Detonation was a trigger pull away. Time passed in grains of sand. Pike's tone sharpened. Window 15 seconds. Wind lull. Take it. Halstead pictured it, the slow inhale, the crosshair steadying in a world that wanted it to shake. The finger settling, the trigger wall met, pressure applied. The Barrett had spoken once. Recoil crushed against her shoulder. Dust burst from the rock. The rounds screamed across open air, dragged by physics and bent by wind. Then impact. The hostile dropped before his thumb reached the switch. The hostages lived. The compound remained intact. The file listed secondary notes, explosive vest armed, remote trigger wired to demolitions beneath foundation. Engagement prevented cascade detonation that would have destroyed adjacent village. Estimated civilian lives preserved 400 plus. Halstead's throat felt dry as he read it. He realized the badge on her chest wasn't decoration. It wasn't bravado. It was a quiet marker for a shot that had decided the fate of an entire village. The file continued with cold efficiency. Engagement verified by multi-angle surveillance. Certified by Mission Command. Result, strategic success. Shooter commended in classified channels. No medals for public ceremony. Only a line in a file that most generals would never see. Dorsey finally spoke. Voice subdued. Sir, that's not legend. That's ledger. It happened. Halstead leaned back in his chair, eyes still on the tablet. In the silence of the office, he felt the hum of air conditioning and the weight of years in uniform. He had seen battles won by artillery, by air power, by armored columns. But this was a war turned by one woman, one rifle, one moment. He scrolled further. There were other engagements, some long, some short, all precise, yet none carried the gravity of that mountain shot. None shifted the course of events in the same way. He closed the file for a moment, pinched the bridge of his nose, then opened it again. He needed to see it twice, like he had stared twice at her badge in the armory. Both times the numbers stayed the same. The more he read, the clearer it became. Cortez was not an anomaly to be dismissed. She was a strategic instrument, hidden under the dull surface of routine service. The badge was no boast. It was an address label for a record that shouldn't exist, but did. He remembered her calm face as she sat among the racks, oiling the steel, unbothered by rank hovering over her. No defiance, no eagerness, just a soldier who knew what she had done and carried it without commentary. The twist turned inside him. The shot hadn't merely broken a record or proved human possibility. It had dismantled an entire chain of disaster. A village still stood because Helena Cortez had read wind for 4 hours and pulled one perfect trigger. Halstead set the tablet down. his hands firm against the desk. He looked at Dorsey, who watched quietly, awaiting orders. The general spoke low, but with conviction. That badge is not for pride. It's for memory. It marks a battlefield no one else saw. He rose from his chair, staring at the window where morning light crept between blinds. In that pale light, he understood that what he'd dismissed as impossible was already history. Signed and sealed, the record existed. It shouldn't, but it did, and it changed everything. The armory at Redstone was the same as ever. Fluorescent lights hummed, solvent hung sharp in the air, rifles lay open in neat rows. Helena Shade Cortez sat in her corner, cloth in hand, methodically working carbon from the chamber of her Barrett M107A1. But the silence around her had changed. Soldiers who once smirked as they passed now lowered their eyes. Jokes died in throats. The rhythm of work carried on, yet a hush followed her bench like a shadow. General Halstead entered without announcement, boots steady, expression unreadable. He carried a thin folder bound in black tape, the cover stamped Top Secret, Iron Watch. He stopped in front of her table and placed it down. The thud was quiet but heavy. Cortez lifted her eyes. "I've seen the record," Halstead said, voice even, "and I've seen enough. The nation still needs you." Shade didn't speak. She simply inclined her head, acknowledgement without ceremony. Then she returned to wiping the bolt face, as if the rifle mattered more than words. Halstead studied her for another moment, then turned. No grand speech, no applause from the ranks. Just a general who now understood what had always been in plain sight. That night the desert was still, moonlight spilling over the barracks. Shade sat alone in her room, packing with quiet discipline. The Barrett case closed with a firm latch, foam cradling steel. On her desk lay a worn dope card, corners curled, ink smudged from years of notes. She slid it into the side pocket of her bag. From a small box, she lifted a single brass casing, engraved faintly with numbers 3400. She placed it carefully beside the card. The radio cracked to life, static breaking the silence. A voice cut through, clipped an official deployment order. Wheels up at 0400. Shade didn't answer. She simply clicked the radio off, finished zipping her pack, and pulled on her boots. Hours later, engines rumbled across the tarmac. A C-17 sat with ramp lowered, lights glowing against the dark. Crew moved briskly, shadows crossing steel. No crowd waited, no cameras, no farewell speeches, just the sound of turbines building to a roar. Cortez walked steady toward the aircraft, silhouette small against the bulk of the transport, case in hand, gear on her back. She climbed the ramp without looking behind. Halstead watched from a distance, hands clasped behind him. The badge on her chest caught the floodlight once, then vanished into shadow as she disappeared inside. The engines thundered higher, dust swirled, lights blinked, and the C-17 rolled forward, carrying her into the night. Somewhere ahead waited another ridge, another mirage, another impossible shot, and she would be ready, because readiness was all she ever carried. Narrators close. The greatest figures rarely raise their voices. They do not ask for recognition. They prepare in silence. And when the world demands it, when lives hinge on a single choice, they breathe, they steady, and they pull the trigger.